Chapter 50. The World Will Embrace Technology. Tianxiahui had grown into a force that controlled half the country. Everyone had assumed Xiongba would press on with conquest, but instead, he stopped declaring new wars and began consolidating what he had already taken. He pulled back his sphere of influence, focused on governance, and set about improving the lands under his control. The sudden change left many people puzzled. Some whispered that Xiongba might yet expel the martial arts supremos and take the world for himself. Others were relieved. Few knew what he was really planning. Xiongba didn't much care what others said. With the high-yield seeds and the technologies he had learned in the Yujian Tavern, he gradually transformed the counties he controlled. Lives improved, and Tianxiahui's reputation shifted from conqueror to benefactor in the eyes of ordinary people. Some martial sects suspected conspiracy in these changes, but the common folk only cared that their harvests were better and their income steadier. The situation in all regions has been good lately. Keep it up. Xiongba glanced up from the report in his hand, the corner of his mouth lifting. He put the paper aside and spoke. Wen Cho, ever the flatterer, leaned forward. Leader, you are wise and martial, unparalleled, a unifier who will be remembered for generations. Xiongba waved him off. Stop it, Wen Cho. No more of that. He smiled and added, the world will grow stronger and stronger. I don't want empty flattery. I want real progress. Wen Cho blinked. He had the uneasy feeling that his leader had changed. The man in front of him was no longer only a martial powerhouse. He suspected some hidden agenda. As far as the world knew, Xiongba was famous for his martial prowess alone, and now he seemed intent on something else. Xiongba didn't attempt to hide the shift. His view had broadened beyond the Central Plains martial world. He no longer cared to be only a Wulin leader or the martial supreme. He had a new aim, to marshal the world's resources and make himself something greater. Go fetch Shuanger and Fenger, Xiongba ordered, Wen Cho. Wen Cho hurried out and called for Qin Shuang and Ni Feng, who were sparring with Bu Jingyun and Duan Lang. Although they were confused, they obeyed their master and excused themselves. Moments later, the two young men stood before Xiongba. Leader, the two young masters have arrived. The others in Tianxiahui always referred to Xiongba's 4 apprentices as the young masters. Very well, come in. Xiongba nodded and turned to his apprentices. He had his own child as well, a daughter he had kept confined on an island in the middle of a lake. He had done it to avoid making her his weakness, yet he had been personally training her since discovering the tavern's knowledge. Once she met his standards, she would be allowed to leave the island. Shuanger, Fenger, he said, addressing Qin Shuang and Ni Feng, I'm going to take you to a place where you can study more systematically. When you return, I want you to help manage Tianxiahui. Going out to study, we will live up to the master's expectations. Qin Shuang bowed. He was not the most talented of the 4, but he was the most loyal, and Xiongba trusted him. Ni Feng, whose loyalty sprang from gratitude and sincerity, was another reason Xiongba had chosen them for the trip. He had watched his 4 apprentices closely and decided that these 2 were right for this mission. You've seen the changes in the world, Xiongba said calmly. What I learned comes from a mysterious place. I want to take you there to learn from the people who know how to use those things. Go pack. Come back shortly. I'll take you there. Without asking why, the 2 young men bowed and went to prepare. They said farewell to Bu Jingyun and Duan Lang and returned to Xiongba's side. Then, they saw something they would never forget. With a casual flick of his hand, a wooden door appeared in midair before them. Xiongba pushed it open and motioned for them to enter. Neither Qin Shuang nor Ni Feng had ever seen anything like it. They stepped through the doorway and found themselves in a strange tavern. Inside, Xiongba glanced about and spotted Jiangju still sitting by the window, book in hand. He ushered his apprentices to a seat and went over to speak with Jiangju about arranging for Qin Shuang and Ni Feng to learn. As he moved, a conversation nearby caught his attention. A discussion about steam technology. Xiongba's eyes brightened. Steam technology was not the delicate sophistication of modern electronics. It only required some basics and could be adapted to a world like theirs. It could be taught to mightiest disciples and then promoted across the land. He leaned forward and with a tone of command said, "I'm very interested in steam technology. If you don't mind, include me. What do you say?" His words drew attention. A man in purple running gear rose and greeted him. "Leader Xiong, you're here too?" "Yes, I'm taking 2 apprentices to learn this modern technology," Xiongba replied. "He has foresight," someone murmured admiringly. "Leader Xiong plans like no one else." The man in purple, Sams, exchanged a look with his companions. They had come for Sams's demonstrations, and now Xiongba's appearance complicated matters. Sams didn't want to give away his own ambitions in front of everyone, so he kept his voice low. "I'll bring copies of some research materials about steam technology when I return," Sams offered. "We can discuss exactly what we need in a private meeting." Xiongba smiled and nodded. Then he excused himself and came to the window where Jiangju sat. "Long time no see," he said, relaxed. "Still living as leisurely as ever, boss." Jiangju closed his book and gave Xiongba a quizzical look. "It has been a while. You look busy. Sit. Come tell me what's on your mind." Xiongba took a seat and spoke plainly. "I want Schwanger and Fenger to learn steam technology and some management skills, either here or in a world similar to this one. I hope you can help me." Chapter 51. The Elder Scrolls. Jiangju was slightly surprised by Xiongba's response. He hadn't expected Xiongba to be willing to let his apprentices learn modern knowledge. That raised another question. In which world should he place them? He had to think carefully. "That's good of you, but I need to think about the most suitable place," Jiangju said after a moment. "As long as they can learn modern knowledge and management, Tianxiahui doesn't need too much muscle power right now. Management talent is what's in short supply." Xiongba smiled. "As long as they can learn modern and managerial skills, I don't care where they go." Jiangju considered for a beat. "I do have a place in mind I think would fit Nifeng and Qin Shuang, but it's not exactly peaceful." "Oh? Which world?" Xiongba asked, curious. "In that world, there's an organization dedicated to training agents, SHIELD. They cultivate people into operatives, and when they're ready, you could send them to Xinjiang to further their education," Jiangju explained. "What do you think?" Xiongba laughed. "Whatever you decide, boss. You know more about this than I do." Jiangju was a little speechless at that easy trust. He dialed the number Nick Fury had left before and arranged for Fury to visit the store when it opened the next morning. There was something to discuss. He told Xiongba and his people they could stay in the tavern. With a casual gesture, he could create a room like the one on the tavern's second floor, saving them the trip home and back again. In the world of the Elder Scrolls, Rust and the others had ridden with the priests for about 10 days until they finally reached the Dawn Guard's keep at the far edge of Skyrim. They had switched horses a few times along the way to make quicker progress. Ma Xiaoling and the others had known the mission would take a long time and had planned accordingly. The time-slowing effect Jiangju's tavern provided in each of their worlds meant their clocks wouldn't race away from them. Everyone could complete their tasks without being rushed. "This place is really remote," Ma Xiaoling said as they looked up at the Dawn Guard's fortress. "If a vampire army attacks, how could we get reinforcements down in time?" "It used to be the headquarters," Rust said. "Every town had a branch and could call on the local lords for aid. But the vampires faded for a while, and the Dawn Guard slowly dwindled." He shrugged. "Nowadays, people treat them like legends." "There's no eternal organization in any world," Sarana said softly. "Ups and downs are normal." Rust smiled and led the group inside. Chai Moexiang and the others weren't outwardly vampiric in the way the Skyrim vampires were, so the Dawn Guard didn't suspect their true nature. When the priests were recognized, every eye in the hall fell on them. The guards were desperate for the priest to decipher the ancient scroll Sarana carried. The priest knew the importance of the task. After a few hours of rest, he summoned the commanders and unrolled the scroll in front of them to study. "What does it say?" Ishran, the Dawn Guard's commander, asked as he approached. "There isn't much," the priest said, voice thin. "It records a divine bow called O'Leary. To learn its full secrets, you need 2 other Elder Scrolls, the Elder Scroll Blood and the Elder Scroll Dragon. I have the Dragon Scroll with me," the priest went on, "but I don't know where the Blood Scroll is." Rust frowned. Are there no other clues here at all? The priest shook his head. None that I can see, or we could try to read the dragon scroll here, though I don't know if I can decipher another one yet. Ishran suggested, take out the dragon scroll and let the priest have a look. The priest sank back in his chair, rubbing at his temples. His face paled. It's soul damage. We're born to read and watch the ancient scrolls, but each one takes a toll. I could try, but not right away. Lust, one of Rust's companions, offered a vial. I have some restoration potions. The priest waved them away with a weak smile. Thank you, but this isn't something a potion fixes. I need rest. Ishran ordered a servant to take the priest to the rest chamber. When they were alone, Ishran turned to Rust. We need the blood scroll. Maybe Sarana can help. She carries an elder scroll. If there are any impressions or clues left on her, she might know. That's all we can do for now, Rust said. What's the situation with vampire attacks across Skyrim? Ishran's face darkened. Not good. The vampires are unusually aggressive. They seem intent on spreading the Dawn Guard's power across the entire province. Right now, we have to rely on you, Rust. Rust sighed. I guess I'm getting used to being relied upon. Ishran glanced at the group. Who are these companions of yours? They're my friends. I'd lay down my life for them, Rust answered with a small, easy laugh. Ishran studied them a moment, then didn't press further. Rust left to find Sarana. As Rust went off, Ishran's eyes lingered. There were thoughts behind them. Rust didn't want to probe. He had his own focus, stopping Sarana's father from consolidating power and avenging those wronged. There were older, darker histories folded into the commander's expressions, memories of men like Alduin and the tangled politics of the past. Back so soon? Did the priest learn anything? Chie-Moexiang asked when Rust returned. Yes, Rust said. The scroll mentions a divine bow. If we find and use that bow, we could stop the Vampire King's plan. A divine bow? Ma Xiaoling's eyes went wide. So all we have to do is find it? If only it were that simple, Rust replied. To unlock the bow's location, you need 2 Elder Scrolls. The priest has the Dragon Scroll, but we still need the Blood Scroll. Sarana spoke up after a thoughtful pause. I remember something about the Blood Scroll. My mother stole 2 scrolls from our house when I was younger. She gave one to me and had it sealed, and she took the other herself. Your father must have known, Dante said. He looked at Sarana with a steady stare. He sent assassins after priests. He must know the scroll's importance. He did know, Sarana agreed. My mother looked into the scroll's contents. My father decided to seal me away and then disappeared. He's probably searching for the priest to stop us. When I left, I took the scroll with me. So the problem now is finding your mother? Chie-Moexiang said. Do you have any clues? If we want to find her, we should search my father's castle, Sarana answered slowly. That's likely where she would have left something. But we can't just walk in the front door. I betrayed my father, so we have to go in through a secret passage at the back. Chapter 52, Transmigrator Academy. Nick Fury had arrived in New York the night before. The pub he'd planned to visit was long closed, so he went straight to see the man he'd shared decades with, the world's first superhero, Steve Rogers. An agent had reported that Captain America was practicing boxing, so Fury walked to the training center. Boxing was one of the few things Steve did besides studying the knowledge of the present era. For all his decades, only Steve felt that nothing about himself had really changed. You're practicing so late you can't sleep? Fury teased as he watched Steve rip off a worn punching bag and strap on a fresh one. I slept plenty, sir. Steve didn't look back. He was still a soldier at heart, not a celebrity. Tall, broad-shouldered, blonde, all strength and discipline. No wonder agents sometimes gawked. How's it feel? Nick asked. Everything's new. It feels like a different world, Steve said quietly. It is, Fury agreed. Times change. It's not just you. Lots of people feel lost. All we can do is adapt. I understand the theory, Steve said, turning to face him, but the practice is hard. Any orders, sir? No, Fury shook his head. Right now the order is simple. Learn and adapt. The changes are bigger than you think. I actually came to invite you out tomorrow. A drink. A drink? Steve sounded puzzled. Yes, we'll talk more then. Fury smiled. Okay. Steve had the time now to say yes. All right, I'll head back. Captain, rest when you can. Fury waved and left. That's odd. Steve watched him go, murmured, then returned to his training. He couldn't afford to sleep. The past filled his dreams. The next morning, Fury brought Steve to a tavern. To Steve's eye, it was an obscure, almost shabby bar, nothing remarkable. "Don't judge by the outside," Fury said with a grin. He was enjoying the captain's bewilderment. Inside, Steve finally understood the scale of the changes Fury had warned him about. He saw an old man in medieval clothes, another man in a dark green tracksuit with a pointed hat, and a third in a traditional Chinese tunic with a red badge pinned to his chest. The stranger from the Middle Ages and the man in the tunic looked shockingly alike, practically twins. "Welcome to the tavern, Captain. It's a strange place." Fury gestured toward the owner. "Hey, stealing my line, are you?" The owner said, shooting a sharp look at the one-eyed man, then smiling at Steve. "Hello, Captain America. I'm Jiangju, the proprietor." Steve frowned. "What is this place?" "This is a crossroads," Jiangju said. "A tavern that connects countless worlds. You've only just woken up. Come, have a drink to soothe your soul." He added with a casual wave, "You've been recognized by the tavern. You're welcome here anytime." Fury had already noticed the small tattoo on Steve's arm, a mark of a wooden door. The sight almost made Fury's heart race. He had been searching for proof of the tavern's existence for a long time and finally found it here. He had to keep his composure. Once calm, he explained the tavern's nature to Steve and filled in the blanks of the captain's shattered assumptions. The wine Jiangju served had a gentle, settling effect. Steve felt his panic ease and listened. After a while, Fury spoke to Jiangju about something that had been on his mind since the previous day. "After what happened with Mr. Xiongba," he said, "I think we should do more than react. We should keep an eye out for talented people from other worlds and help them adapt to this era. I want to propose a school, an academy, to educate these transworld students." "An academy?" Jiangju raised an eyebrow. "Interesting idea, but I don't trust S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury blinked. "Why not? We can handle security and the logistics." "You're a spy agency," Jiangju interrupted, "not an educational institution. S.H.I.E.L.D. answers to the World Security Council. It's not the right body to run a school of this sort." Fury didn't expect that. He'd never realized Jiangju distrusted S.H.I.E.L.D. so much. He hadn't fully admitted to himself how compromised his organization had become in some circles. "I'm not saying you can't be involved," Fury said slowly. "We can build something that protects these people." Jiangju's expression was calm but firm. "I can let you have the 2 kids from yesterday because they can look after themselves. But leave this kind of academy to S.H.I.E.L.D.? I don't think it would end well. If an organization like yours ran it, I can see it becoming the flashpoint for a war between worlds." Fury was silent for a moment, considering. The idea of an academy still appealed to him, but Jiangju's warning lingered like a shadow, one Fury couldn't ignore. Chapter 53, Interview with the Vampire. Jiangju didn't want Nick Fury running this academy. He had his own ideas. He wanted to try to change the futures of some worlds, but that didn't mean importing modern knowledge wholesale would automatically fix everything. Worlds differ in countless ways. The same method won't work everywhere. What the first emperor achieved couldn't be replicated by later emperors. Times change, authority differs. Xiongba might do what he did, but Dongfang Bubai might not. No matter how formidable Dongfang Bubai was, he couldn't simply overwrite a world's military structure, especially in a low military world. Importing Western education could transform a world into something unrecognizable. For that reason, Jiangju rejected Nick Fury's proposal. And if a school were to be founded, it would be built on Chinese soil. Though he had attained Tao and become something like an immortal, he hadn't forgotten his roots. His foundation was there. "You," Jiangju said lightly, "I think you should train these 2 students properly. There may be changes later, but for now, I won't agree to S.H.I.E.L.D. building an academy here." Nick Fury listened, silent after a drink, then thought over Jiangju's words with growing unease. There was something in them, an implication that something within S.H.I.E.L.D. was off that he had failed to notice until now. He looked up at Jiangju as if searching his face for a clue, but Jiangju was already leaving, calm as ever, flanked by 2 men. Nick had only a moment to absorb the warning. He resolved to tuck this matter into his mind and begin a quiet investigation into S.H.I.E.L.D., though he wasn't sure who he could trust. Xiangba clasped his fists respectfully toward Nick. Mr. Fury, I'll leave this to you. I have nothing more to say here. This, he added, producing a small tin, is a golden wound remedy used throughout my world. It's excellent for treating injuries. Consider it a parting gift. Thank you, Mr. Xiongba. I'll do my best to train your two students into real talents, Nick replied with a smile as he took the ointment. He didn't scoff at exotic cures. Some of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s own Black Ops tech was useful, but gaining Xiongba's goodwill was valuable, especially since no official contract had been signed yet. The personal gift alone showed how much Xiongba cared about this apprenticeship mission. Schwanger, Fenger, Xiongba said, turning to the two apprentices beside him, you have a basic understanding now of this tavern and this world. When you live here, listen more, speak less, learn quickly, serve society, and benefit the people. Master, we won't let you down, Qin Shuang and Ni Feng answered in unison, eyes full of reverence and hope. To them, this world seemed like a paradise. Once they'd learned modern knowledge, they could return and build their home into a place of harmony. Xiongba did not spoil those illusions. Experience would teach them otherwise. They signed the contract. Xiongba handed over the formula for an elixir that could strengthen health and a detailed set of alchemical techniques. Their homeworld was one of high martial arts, but fortunately, it had no gods or other supernatural forces that would make the alchemy incompatible here. That meant their techniques could be applied in the real world. Nick's job was to train Qin Shuang and Ni Feng into elites, not only in science and management, but also to protect them from harm. Under no circumstances were they to be subjected to human experimentation. Nick planned to groom them as future directors of S.H.I.E.L.D., though not to remain here forever, but to return with the skills and authority they needed. After the formalities, Nick watched Qin Shuang and Ni Feng cling to their master a little longer. He didn't leave immediately. He turned instead toward the tavern's television. A live broadcast was showing Rust and the others preparing a covert assault on a vampire castle. He intended to watch it with the captain, but when he looked back, the captain was slumped unconscious at the bar. Jiangju had told him the captain had learned of Jiangju's existence, ordered a drink to calm himself, and ended up passed out. It'll take him some time to adjust to this era, Nick murmured, then refocused on the screen. Live broadcast. The Elder Scrolls world. Rust and the others had traveled for several days and at last arrived at the far northwest of Skyrim. Before them lay a vast sea shrouded in thick fog. Visibility dropped to only a few dozen meters. The castle is on an island not far off, Serana told the group. We'll have to approach carefully. My father keeps piranhas and some very aggressive sharks in these waters, his eyes and ears. How are we supposed to get there? Akaya Moeka, clad in a sailor uniform despite the cold, stared at the foggy waters and showed for the first time a flicker of fear. Afraid of the sea? Ma Xiaoling teased, delighted to have found a weakness. The group had become close after their time together, but friendship among them often took the form of playful barbs. The two friends began trading small talk about cosmetics, boys, and Dante as they walked, subjects that made them almost annoyingly normal. Vampires in our world are afraid of water, but only full immersion really hurts us, Chie Moexiang explained, answering a question in passing and covering a possible tactical problem. A quick splash won't do much. No worries, I've got the perfect fix, Ma Xiaoling said, smiling as she drew a talisman from her pocket. This will keep the water from reaching you. You don't need to be afraid. Thank you, Sister Xiaoling, Chie Moexiang replied happily. If you'd stop calling me sister, I might be even happier, Ma Xiaoling said with mock offense. Chai was a vampire and had likely outlived them all by decades, but she insisted she was still a high school student and didn't want her age exaggerated. You've completely lost your cold queen image, Dante complained at the sight of their banter. All right, it's time to go. It's daytime now. Most vampires are asleep, so we can't waste this opportunity, Rust said, sounding the cue. Yes, the others responded immediately, the resolve in their voices belying the nervous laughter that followed as they prepared to set off across the mist-shrouded sea. Chapter 54, Interview with the Vampire 2. Vampire Hunter D was handsome and taciturn. In ordinary company, he was cold and reserved, but the moment vampires were involved, he became an entirely different man. His hatred for them seemed bred into him. He wanted them dead, no matter the cost. Yet that hardness had softened a little since the tavern, after the group had encountered so many strange creatures. When they met Sarana, Dee didn't lunge for his sword like he had with Akimoka. He spoke little, but every word was sharp and precise, able to cut to the heart of a problem. Even when Rust's tone began to fray, Dee would quietly stop him. Over time, the others had learned to follow Dee's orders without question. A gray morning fog hugged the sea as their small boat skimmed forward, powered silently by magic. After half an hour, they made out a dark island on the horizon and the silhouette of a castle rising from it. Sarana told Lust to stop using magic. "All right," she said. "We can't keep using magic to rush this. My father raised creatures that are very sensitive to magic. Be prepared for a fight." Ma Xiaoling frowned. "What do these guardians detect? Is it raw magic energy, or some kind of sensing spell?" "They're actually tuned to any magical disturbance," Sarana explained. "They'll react to the flow of magic itself." Ma Xiaoling smiled. "That won't be a problem. My Taoist arts draw on the basic forces of nature. They won't trigger those wards." Lust looked at her with envy. "Taofa is such a miraculous power. I wish I had strength like that." Ma Xiaoling's smile hid a private thought. The Ma family's Taoist tradition could only be passed down to daughters, and it came with strict ancient rules. Their women were taught that attachments to men were forbidden. The line had to be preserved and the duties fulfilled. It was a stern upbringing, and many Ma cousins were raised under harsh expectations. She shook the thought off as the boat glided on. She noticed Rust and Sarana holding hands and felt a sudden flutter of emotion she hadn't expected. She laughed quietly at herself for being sentimental. "Sister Xiaoling, is something wrong?" Chia Mengxiang asked, watching her curiously. "Nothing much. Seeing the two of them together just got me a little emotional," Ma Xiaoling admitted. "I used to think the kind of love in novels was false and that friendships could be hypocritical, but meeting all of you has shown me the world I knew was too small." Chia Mengxiang sat closer, her white hair soft and fragrant under Ma Xiaoling's fingers. "Then you should find someone who loves you," she teased. "The boys at school are hopeless," Ma Xiaoling laughed. "Me? I had a first crush once, a secret, but then I got busy with shopping and demon hunting. Who has time for romance?" Still, Chie thought there was more behind her smile, but before she could press it, the island loomed large and the boat put in. They stepped ashore under Sarana's lead and saw strange stone statues scattered everywhere, gargoyles, frozen in grotesque poses. "Gargoyles," Sarana whispered. "Everyone, circle around me. I know their perception range." They skirted several of the statues carefully. Gargoyles looked like inert stone, but any living creature coming inside their sensing range would wake them. When one stirred, the others nearby could come alive in sympathy. Detection magics couldn't pick them up, and they favored ambushes. "The defenses here are intense," Dante muttered. "It's the castle of Skyrim's greatest vampire lord," Sarana said lightly. "It was important enough to have Dawn Guard forces on it once." "That's why we can't just storm in," Rust added. "We still don't know how strong the Lord is. If we can find the divine bow, though, it might give us the edge to weaken the vampires." They followed Sarana cautiously until they found a hidden vent leading into the mountain, a cellar entrance Sarana recognized. She had discovered it as a child, and the memory brought a sudden, visible shadow across her face. Rust stepped closer. "It's all right. We're with you." Sarana forced a small smile and nodded. "Thank you. Don't worry. I'll be fine." She glanced at the dark opening. "This cellar has been abandoned for a long time. I don't know what's down there now. Stay alert." Ma Xiaoling's brow puckered. "There won't be those huge spiders down there, will there?" Despite being a capable exorcist, Ma Xiaoling had an irrational dread of Skyrim's frost spiders. It was one thing to face ghouls and undead. Her family's line had produced generations of specialists in zombie generals, after all. But spiders were a different matter. She said it with mock indignation. The Ma family feared no ghoul. They developed spells to obliterate zombies through dozens of generations. A single ghoul was nothing. But spiders, there is a peculiar rule in the world. The more you fear something, the more likely it is to appear. Call it Murphy's Law. Ma Xiaoling's anxiety, combined with the cold, abandoned cellar and the region's climate, made the odds simple to predict. If there were creatures lurking below, they would not be small. Frost spiders loved the chill of Skyrim, and their survivability was legendary. By the time the group moved toward the vent, the most reasonable conclusion was this. The cellar probably contained frost spiders, at least 3 to 5 of them. Chapter 55, Interview with the Vampire 3. This is nothing but a monster's lair, Moexiang said, crushing the skull of a skeleton soldier underfoot. Not just a lair, Dante corrected, pulling his twin pistols and firing them in a staccato rhythm until the blasts sounded like a Gatling. Since his guns were magical artifacts, ammunition was not a concern. First spiders, then grizzly bears, now undead. What's next? Ma Xiaoling scowled. This is getting ridiculous. Rust smiled. That line reminds me of the day I first met my great savior. Larov said something like that. The savior? Who's Larov? Ma Xiaoling asked, puzzled. Alduin saved me from the Empire's executioner, Rust replied breezily. Too bad he was a destroyer and I happened to be dragonborn, he shrugged. Ralof, he was with the Stormcloaks, pathetic lot. Basically an army of racists who want to drive everyone who isn't Nord out of Skyrim. Ma Xiaoling's expression hardened. She thought of her homeland, of how it had been mauled and discriminated against by the world, how it had clawed back its place. That's awful, she said quietly. We've been on the receiving end of that sort of hatred, too. It leaves a bitter taste. Those Stormcloaks, Rust shook his head. I wasn't interested in politics, but after what I went through, I can't just ignore it. The Empire isn't perfect either, but still. They moved on. The 6 of them, Moexiang, Dante, Ma Xiaoling, Rust, Akaya Mocha, and the pale woman who led them, Serana, cut through the last of the undead guards and entered a wide hall. Bones and skulls had been heaped into a low hill in the center. The sight sobered everyone. For a few moments they walked in heavy silence, the only voice to cut it coming from Serana, who was needed to guide them through this place. They passed under the vaulted stone for a few minutes before Serana halted and pointed. There was no more floor. The passage ended in a rotting suspension bridge. Everyone, look, she said. The gatehouse should be nearby. Can we just push the bridge across? Moexiang asked, stretching, already calculating the weight and balance. There won't be any traps, right? I don't remember, Serana admitted. It's been a long time, longer than I can say. I was sealed away for almost 1,000 years. Some things blur. She had been told by her mother, she said, but centuries of sleep had faded many details. For safety, check for traps. I don't want to wake anything we don't have to. Since the ladies are afraid of the dark, I'll do the trap checks, Dante said with a mock bow and a grin as he stepped forward. Ha! Dante's such a gentleman, Akaya Mocha purred, smiling like a queen. Ma Xiaoling nodded in appreciation. The bridge rasped and clattered as it was lowered. Dante went first, sweeping the path for snares and wards. Satisfied, he waved the others across. On the far side, they found a doorway veiled in thick, ancient spider webs. Ma Xiaoling let out a helpless noise when she saw it. The rest exchanged glances that might have become laughter if not for what waited inside. Why are there giant spiders here? This place is ice cold and lifeless, Rust muttered, turning to Serana as if expecting an explanation or a reprimand. If she hadn't led them here, he might have thought she'd lured them into a trap. What emerged from the dim chamber was a spider the size of a small horse, 3 to 4 meters across, easily twice as large as the giant spiders they'd encountered earlier. It moved with a dreadful, predatory grace and made a very unfriendly beeline for them. Rust tossed up a fireball, but the blast only staggered the monster a few steps back. They had gotten used to fighting spiders. They knew the patterns. When the great arachnid reared its fangs and shot a stream of venom, Ma Xiaoling didn't hesitate. She drew a talisman, which blossomed into a strange globe of water in the air. It caught the venom midstream, sealed it, and with a practiced gesture, she flung the dripping sphere out of the ruined window, where it fell and shattered against the cliffs below. Dante and Dee drew their massive blades and darted beneath the spider's belly, moving between its churning legs. But this beast had a far tougher hide than the ones they'd seen before. Even with artifact-level weapons, their strikes barely cut it. Moexiang acted then. She drove her foot into a seam of stone, vaulted into the air, and before anyone could blink, she was above the spider, her fist connecting with a thunderous crunch on its head. The creature toppled like a felled tree. Anyone who had seen Chaya in action would not have been surprised. She was, after all, called the great demon of power in her own world, a living, terrifying force. "My dear, only Sister Tsunade comes anywhere close," Lust said with a touch of reverence. "Don't just admire it, finish it," Sarana snapped. A spear of crackling lightning leapt from her hand and struck the spider, sending it into a paralyzed convulsion. Dante and Dee took the chance. They sprang onto the spider's motionless belly and sank their swords deep into the snow-white undercarapace, cutting a wide, grotesque gash. They pressed down hard to make sure the wound bled freely before they leapt away. After their first battle with these things, none of them wanted to be splattered by that dark green ichor. "Good. Let's go. This place stinks," Sarana said, already moving toward the window. Beneath another lattice of cobwebs, she found a mechanism and, with a few manipulations, lowered a second suspension bridge to the courtyard outside. When they stepped into the open, the sky above was a rare sight, the first time they'd seen it since entering the castle. From where they stood, they could just make out the outer wall of the fortress. They hadn't actually gotten outside the castle grounds, but they were out of the interior. "Along this bridge is the Forkiha courtyard," Sarana said, speaking more to herself than anyone else. "There's supposed to be a mechanism, an escape tunnel, that leads into the castle proper. But since these people became vampires, most of those devices stopped working." They crossed the bridge and entered a courtyard that had obviously been abandoned for decades. At its center sat a strange lunar machine, weathered by time, a moon-shaped device, cracked and incomplete. Sarana explained that the secret passage they needed lay beneath that moon mechanism, but the mechanism would only reveal the entrance if its missing piece, the incomplete moon segment, was found and reattached. They stood in the chill air and surveyed the ruined courtyard, feeling the weight of the castle's secrets pressing in. Finding that missing piece would be their next task. Chapter 56. Changes in the Worlds. The first emperor finished processing the last memorial and circulated his chi to ease the numbness in his limbs. He rose, switched off the desk lamp, and stood by the window. The palace was now wired with electrical circuits powered by a tiny arc reactor. The immortal magic weapons he brought out no longer astonished anyone. From the people's point of view, their ruler walked like a god. Xianyang had been remade in a few short months. The city no longer slept. The curfew had been lifted, except for those of suspicious origin, and nighttime streets were still busy with people. Curious onlookers craned their necks at every lamppost, so the emperor stationed watchers everywhere. Early on, some had tried to climb the posts, thinking the glowing orbs were pearls and were electrocuted as a result. Those scandals had died down. These engineering robots are unbelievably useful. It only took 3 months to renovate all of Xianyang, he thought with a faint smile. With Jiangju's help, and in cooperation with Skynet, the Mechanical Emperor and others, he'd had a class of engineering automatons developed, intelligent enough to work independently, but programmed never to betray him. He bought 100,000 units and procured arc reactors from a man called Tony Stark. Apart from construction materials, the running costs were negligible. When a robot broke, it went to Skynet for repair. Some went to Gong Shuqiu for study. He'd also founded a special office that recruited bright children from across the realm and sent them to a secret base under the palace for training. Young minds he hoped to turn into the scientists and engineers who could remake the world. Naturally, rumors spread. Nobles from the 6 kingdoms, eager to destabilize Qin, whispered that the emperor was sacrificing children to prolong his life. He paid no personal attention to such slanders, but he understood the power of public opinion. The government therefore launched the Qin Daily to explain policies and relay decrees. Printed on snow-white paper with modern anti-counterfeiting features, it silenced many would-be troublemakers. This realm simply had no ready means to counterfeit such materials. Since the emperor stepped into the tavern and began importing knowledge from other worlds, the entire Qin state had changed. The Great Wall was still being built, but this time people flocked to work on it rather than being dragged there. Food and warm clothing were guaranteed for laborers. In a region where farming tech remained primitive, that security mattered. The emperor periodically bought grain and fresh produce from other realms with treasury funds. Ministers asked awkward questions about the sudden outflow of money, but when the sacks and crates arrived, brimming with grain and fruits, the likes of which people had rarely seen, no one pressed the matter. Change eroded the old conspiracies. The nobles who used to rally people against the tyranny of the first emperor found fewer willing listeners. His intermittent displays of technological marvels only increased his prestige. Only die-hard haters, or those with otherworld ambitions, continued to resist. For ordinary folk, the old dynastic rivalries and aristocratic feuds were distant concerns. They worried about food, shelter, and family. Life was getting better, and that practical improvement was more persuasive than any rhetoric. The emperor also moved on the legal front. A new Qin constitution was promulgated, abolishing many archaic and oppressive practices and replacing them with laws that eased everyday burdens. The result was a livelier, more hopeful public mood. Novel gadgets and new institutions radiated outward from Shanyang into the surrounding counties, and the dream of a stable, prosperous Qin began to feel real. Standing at the window, watching the city glow, the emperor reflected on his plans. He had begun to cultivate Zhenqi seriously. After using imperial dragon energy to lay a foundation here, he intended to pass the throne to one of his better sons and depart to other worlds through the tavern to continue his pursuit of immortality. He wanted to leave the great Qin in a state worthy of the people and worthy of Jiangju, who had watched over him. Jiangju's care mattered to him. The emperor had learned that before Jiangju became an immortal, he had once lived in a Qin realm that had unified the land and ushered in a feudal order. That affinity made Jiangju protective of Qin, and the emperor felt both flattered and responsible. He did not want to disappoint Jiangju's trust. Looking at the bright lights of Xianyang, he felt confident. As long as he held to his original resolve, he would become an emperor who stood the test of ages. He had no intention of leaping straight to a wholesale political revolution. Radical change was neither realistic nor necessary. First, he had to secure food and clothing for the people, then combine scientific advances with the diverse schools of thought across the land to forge a unique Qin civilization. The longer-term consequences could be left to future generations to sort out. "Your Majesty, the Emperor Taiyi of the East requests an audience," a chamberlain said softly, bringing the emperor back to the present. "Send him in," the emperor replied evenly. Donghuang Taiyi, Emperor of the East, was the supreme leader of the Yin-Yang house, a figure wrapped in mystery. He always wore a black robe and a mask, and no one had ever seen his face or fully measured his power. Whether current or former, the first emperor treated capable men generously, masked or unmasked, barefoot or in silk. Anyone who proved their usefulness and showed loyalty or sincere cooperation with Qin would find favor. Those who refused, however, would find that the emperor did not hesitate to strike them down. Chapter 57, Interview with Vampires, The Mystery of the Cold Harbor Girl. The first emperor sat alone in the tavern, sipping a restorative wine, but his thoughts drifted to Donghuang Taiyi, the former head of the Yin and Yang family. Donghuang had been trying to obtain the Kanglong Chisu, a thing said to contain the star secrets of 7 nations. Whoever controlled it would hold enormous power. Those secrets were scattered across 7 countries, however, and no single person could locate them all. When Yingzheng was still a prince, Donghuang had covertly offered cooperation. If he helped Yingzheng become Qin's supreme ruler and the other 6 kingdoms were destroyed, the puzzle of the secrets would be trivial to solve. For that reason, Donghuang had supported and remained loyal to Yingzheng. But now, as the first emperor sat in the tavern, he had no interest in a power that could be unlocked only by deciphering those secrets. He had found a faster, more convenient shortcut, one that still required caution, but a shortcut nonetheless. Donghuang, sensing changes in the emperor's mind and uncertain about recent events in the empire, returned to the palace to ask questions. The first emperor answered without holding back. He no longer needed the Kanglong Chisu, but as an old ally, he would continue to help Donghuang. What exactly is the Kanglong Chisu? Donghuang asked. The emperor only smiled faintly. No matter how great a secret, nothing is bigger than a tavern, he said, and then turned his attention elsewhere. The Elder Scrolls world. In another world, Rust and the others finally breached the Vampire King's castle. After dispatching a few more gargoyles, they found a sealed chamber, an alchemy laboratory once used by Serana's mother, abandoned after she departed. Serana felt that if there was any chance of tracing the ancient scroll her mother had taken, this room would hold the best clues. "This was my mother's lab," Serana said quietly, running a hand over the familiar benches with a softened expression. "There has to be something here. Let's start with the bookshelves." "Are these books about alchemy?" Dante asked, peering curiously at the volumes. "I'm not sure," Serana admitted. "I never liked studying this stuff when I was younger." Her smile was small and a little lonely. Rust stepped forward and took her hand. She brightened at the gesture. After all, she wasn't alone now. Someone cared for her and was with her. "Ugh, I'm being fed dog food again," Jie Mengxiang muttered, half-joked, half-envying. "I never understood that phrase," Dante said. "Where did it come from?" "It's from the boss," Dee said, suddenly matter-of-fact. He explained that single people are called single dogs, and when couples display affection, it's like they're showing off in front of single dogs. The single dogs can only bear it quietly, so they're being fed dog food. Dee's straightforwardness left everyone staring. His cheeks flushed faintly. The group set about searching the surprisingly large laboratory. Ma Xiaoling moved among the shelves. Thanks to the tavern's abilities, as a traveler, she could read the books and understand them. She read carefully, hoping for clues, and because many of the volumes were on alchemy, she found herself absorbed in them. Then, a scrap of paper slipped from a book and floated to the floor, snapping her back to attention. "Huh? What's this?" Ma Xiaoling picked it up and examined it. It looked like someone's notes, but large swathes had been blacked out or altered. Straining to decipher it, she could only make out a few phrases: ancient prophecy, sacrifice, Cold Harbor Girl, soul cairn. Her curiosity spiked. Cold Harbor Girl? Ma Xiaoling turned and found a book on the shelf titled The Mystery of the Lady of Cold Harbor. She pulled it free and began to read. As she read about Cold Harbor, how a Cold Harbor Girl was defined, and how pureblood vampires were born, something cold and terrible flared inside her, a hatred so intense it was almost physical. For the first time in her life, she felt murderous intent toward a person. She gripped the book so hard, a small flash of flame sparked on her fingertips, burning the edge of the paper, but the hatred inside her didn't fade. "Sister Xiaoling, what's wrong?" The others, sensitive to such strong animus, hurried over. "I'm fine." Jie Mengxiang's voice steadied Ma Xiaoling. She forced herself to calm, then looked at Jie Mengxiang. "I just found something I must do in this life, more important to me than family fate." "What is it?" Jie Mengxiang asked. "We'll talk after we leave," Ma Xiaoling said. "I found clues, but they've been tampered with. Much of it's unreadable." She handed the altered note to Jie Mengxiang. Someone had erased the phrase Cold Harbor Girl entirely. Everyone gathered around. The sudden murderous aura had startled them, and they wanted to know what Ma Xiaoling had found. She looked at Serana beside Rust and added, "Seeing the word sacrifice makes me uneasy." No one present questioned why Serana might be implicated. "The important thing is this paper," Ma Xiaoling said, passing the damaged sheet around. "There could be clues about Serana's mother." "Ancient prophecy, sacrifice, soul cairn," Rust pondered aloud. "The ancient prophecy must be what Serana's father believed in. The sacrifice might refer to Serana's own offering to some dark god. As for the soul cairn, I don't really know what that is." "It's like this," Serana said, glancing at Ma Xiaoling. "The soul cairn is a place only the dead can enter. It's a realm of the dead, similar to the underworld Miss Ma mentioned before." "Could your mother be hidden in the soul cairn?" Rust asked suddenly. "If only the dead can enter, that would stop your father from going in and taking the Elder Scrolls." "It's possible," Serana said, weighing the idea. "But how would we get there?" "Maybe Sister Xiaoling can sense a direction," Jie Mengxiang suggested. "You said before you can use spiritual guidance, right?" "I can try," Ma Xiaoling said after thinking. "I don't know if spiritual summoning works in this world, though. We'll need an object as a medium. She touched the damaged paper. This could be a scrap from your mother's diary. It might work. Nearly 1,000 years had passed since Sarana had been sealed and her mother departed. There was no better candidate for a medium than this scrap. Ma Xiaoling took a slim talisman pen disguised as an eyebrow pencil from her makeup box and, crouching on the cold floor, drew a complex sigil on the ground. She placed the scrap of paper in the center, formed a seal with her hands, and murmured an incantation in a voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, the air in the laboratory chilled dramatically. Frost feathered the edges of the books. Breath steamed in the brief cold. Then, 30 seconds later, everything snapped back to normal. Ma Xiaoling wiped at the talisman with her foot and coughed, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. "What happened?" Rust asked, concerned. "It backfired," Ma Xiaoling said, swallowing. "The underworld in this world is in chaos. I couldn't sense your mother at all. Whatever's protecting her is very powerful. And while I was forcing a connection, a dragon soul tried to slip through into our world. I had to stop it by force. The backlash hit me." She wiped the blood from her lip and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll need another way to reach the soul cairn." Chapter 58. Jiangzhi has no one set. The live broadcast finally came to a close when Rust and the others found a red leather notebook. Viewers watching at home blinked at their screens and realized the stream was over, and, with a small jiggle in their wallets, that today's budget had quietly evaporated. Time flew by. A short-haired boy wailed. "I forgot I promised Index I'd go shopping with her. It's fine. I'll only bite you once. Maybe you'll enjoy it." Jiang Ju replied calmly. "Is that something a human would say?" The girl with the prickly, hedgehog-like haircut scowled at him. "I'm not a pervert." "I never said you were a pervert. Why are you so eager to deny it?" Jiang Ju chuckled. "Besides, I'm not even human." Kamiju Tuma was momentarily speechless. Compared to this person's shamelessness and casual honesty, he felt embarrassingly young. Maybe the man in front of him was a level 6 of shamelessness. The thought made Kamiju oddly proud. "You always make me think things I shouldn't," Jiang Ju observed softly. "The thoughts are all yours." Kamiju shot back, stood up and said, "Index is still waiting for me. Boss, I'm going." "Go on, Mr. Kamiju pervert." Jiang Ju waved him off as he began stacking tables and chairs around the inn. Guests filtered out one by one. Once everything was tidied, Jiang Ju opened the door and stepped out. Xiao He had left the tavern ages ago and wandered off somewhere unknown. He stopped at a fast food truck for a chicken roll, then strolled without purpose through the city. Sometimes he read quietly on a bench. Sometimes he plunged into the bustle to feel what life was like outside his usual routines. People's personalities were complicated and changeable. One small thing could steer a decision or reshape someone's mood. Yet when others judged someone, they tended to cling to a single label and never considered motives. A person who did something kind might be called good by some, pretentious by others, or nosy by yet another. Labels came from observers' impressions, not from the subject. Jiang Ju disliked being boxed in by other people's quick judgments. He could be stingy one day because of human entanglements, or suddenly generous the next for reasons no one could guess. To reduce a person to a label based on a sliver of knowledge was foolish at best and manipulative at worst. His phone buzzed. He apologized to the young woman sketching on the sidewalk and answered. The artist, who had been studying his features for a while, slid the drawing over as they talked. Jiang Ju listened to the voice on the line and grinned. It suited him as easily as any face from east or west. "Hi, Tony," he said casually. "What's up?" "Dinner. Are you free tonight?" Tony's hearty voice came through the speakers. After dealing with Ivan Vanko and some messy business with the U.S. military, and winning S.H.I.E.L.D.'s goodwill, Stark was finally ready to relax. He wanted to celebrate. "I'm in New York. How about we go for some barbecue?" "Sure," Jiang Ju said with a smile. "I'm at Times Square." "Perfect. I'll come find you." Tony hung up. With Jarvis at his back, locating someone in New York was trivial. "Done," the artist announced, flipping her board. "Take a look." Jiang Ju leaned forward and examined the sketch. He cupped his chin theatrically. "Not bad, but you didn't capture my handsomeness at all." The woman raised an eyebrow. "That'll be $20. "20?" Jiang Ju scoffed. I didn't come here for a portrait. I only let you draw me because you asked. I thought it would be free. Sir, she said, offended, do you think I'm kidding? 20 is reasonable. My work is worth it. I'll give you 5 in dollars, Jiangju countered, holding out his palms. You didn't even get the light in my eyes. I saw no light to begin with, she muttered. $20 was a fair price for her, and she was proud of her work. They bargained back and forth. In the end, Jiangju reluctantly handed over $10 and tucked the portrait into his coat. As expected, he murmured, no matter how you look, he's handsome. The artist's annoyed face made her walk off in a huff. A luxury car idled not far away. Tony watched the bargaining scene from inside, amusement playing across his features, but he let Jiangju finish. When Jiangju zipped the portrait away and turned to leave, Happy honked. Tony stepped out of the car and called loudly, ignoring the crowd that had begun to murmur around them. Hi, Boss Jiang, over here! Jiangju waved and joined them. When Tony's bodyguards formed a shield of space, Jiangju sat in the back seat beside Tony. The car eased into traffic, leaving behind a handful of fans who kept snapping pictures and arguing about the stranger's identity. You in a good mood tonight? Tony asked with a grin. Not bad, Jiangju replied. I can't stay cooped up in the tavern all the time, or I'll start growing mold. Tony nodded. I've been tinkering at home, too. Been working on some interesting stuff. A steel suit? Jiangju tilted his head. Think about nanoscale armor. That's where things are going. Jarvis, add study nanotech suit to the memo, Tony said, bright-eyed. He pulled out his phone, despite Jarvis already listening. It's noted, sir, Jarvis replied in the car's audio. However, there is no complete, stable nanotechnology on Earth at present. That research may be premature. That's fine, Jarvis. I didn't say Earth tech had to be the source, Tony answered with a smile, then turned to Jiangju. This call was worth it. Then let's go eat, Jiangju said, matching his smile. Chapter 59, The Soulstone Tomb. Jiangju and Tony met at a barbecue joint that came highly recommended. When they arrived, Jiangju noticed Pepper was already there. Tony introduced them with a smile, saying nothing about the tavern, only that Jiangju was a very good friend. Pepper eyed Jiangju with polite curiosity. Tony had plenty of friends, but he rarely invited anyone to a place like this. Usually he only brought Roddy along. Just then the owner, having heard that Tony Stark had arrived, came over to greet them and hand Tony a menu. Let me order, Pepper said smoothly, taking the menu and placing a few confident orders. I know it's not as fancy as Zhao's place, but it has its own charm. Tony paid no attention to the owner's presence and turned to Jiangju with a grin. I'm not picky about food, Jiangju said. Eating is all about company. Even the best dish can taste like nothing if you're sitting across from someone you hate. Perfect time for a drink, Tony said, looking at him. Trying to get a free drink? Jiangju teased. Then, as if by magic, he produced a slightly chilled bottle from under the table and added, This is the right occasion. This one's perfect. Tony's eyes lit up. He knew that bottle wasn't ordinary. He eagerly took it, pouring for the three of them himself, a small, surprising gesture that made Pepper raise an eyebrow. Tony usually didn't accept things directly from anyone except her. It was an uncharacteristically low-key moment for him. The barbecue arrived slowly, but the restaurant's atmosphere was relaxed, and nobody minded the wait. Conversations were hushed. Tony answered a few curious customers with casual remarks about being out with friends, and because they sat away from the windows, their table didn't attract much attention. For Jiangju, it was a nice, low-pressure experiment. The food itself was simple and homey, less polished than upscale establishments, but sincere in its flavors. Maybe that's why Tony liked this place. This is nice, Jiangju said. You should bring Xiaohei next time. If you didn't tell me, I'd feel offended. Where's Mr. Blackie? Tony asked, amused. He's probably in China right now, playing with a certain panda, Jiangju replied. He likes to wander. Wait, are you talking about the panda? Pepper piped up, curious. Isn't he the one who once asked the Chinese government to sell him a panda and was turned down? Me? Ask for a panda? Tony feigned indignation. Pepper reminded him that he'd complained once upon hearing the rental fee for a panda was $1 million, and teased that China must have had a reason to refuse. They laughed. There have been plenty of ridiculous things I've done. Tony admitted with a grin. But hey, thanks for dinner. When you're free, come to the tavern. I'll let you try some of my glowing dishes. Glowing dishes? Tony leaned forward, intrigued. Pepper, meanwhile, took it as a joke or an exaggeration. You remember to come with Miss Potts, Jiangju said, standing up. Call me when you have time. He said his goodbyes and left. Tony and Pepper rode back to his New York villa in Happy's car. Tony was planning to move his company headquarters to New York. He'd already bought a building in Manhattan, demolished the Tianjiang building, and planned to erect a new iconic Stark Industries tower in its place. As for why Pepper went with him, Tony had finally confessed his feelings, and they had moved from a boss and assistant relationship to being a couple. Their romance hadn't followed the usual slow path. They'd skipped a few steps and gone straight to living together. I didn't realize you had a Chinese friend, Pepper said as they drove. I mean, not counting business partners. I didn't really think about it, Tony said. Remember that time I got attacked in New York and then ended up in that bar, and I was a bit of a mess? I think you recalled how different I was. You really scared me back then, Pepper said. But how does Jiangju fit into that story? He owned the bar, Tony explained. I'd said something offhand about the place's layout being terrible. Then he retaliated. Retaliated? Pepper asked, puzzled. Like hypnosis? You said he did magic that night. It wasn't hypnosis, Tony said. It was a real illusion. I can still remember being struck by it 9 times. After that, I was in a daze, confused all day, and angry for no reason. When I found out what had happened to Jiangju, I went over to talk it out. That's excessive, Pepper said, clearly irritated on Tony's behalf. You made a casual remark and he had to mess with you like that? Tony chuckled ruefully. I thought the same thing at the time, but once I got to know him and learned more, he's actually a good person. Pepper smiled. I don't fully understand him yet, but I'm glad you've got a real friend. Tony wrapped an arm around her and tightened his embrace, feeling like the luckiest man alive. From being an unlikely hero to gaining a kind of divine recognition, and now having someone he loved beside him, he hadn't expected any of it, but he wasn't complaining. Chapter 60, Real Soul Stone Tomb. After some quick field repairs, Ma Xiaoling's injuries had mostly healed. They had also found the research notes left behind by Serana's mother. The rituals recorded in those pages finally revealed a way to open a portal into the world of the dead, the Soul Cairn. The catch was that the portal required 3 specific ingredients: finely ground bone powder, purified void salt, and shards of a soul stone. Lucky for us, I keep things like that in my space props, Luster said with a grin, producing the 3 components. Following the instructions, Luster mixed them with alchemy and brewed a potion. He poured it onto the designated spot, and a shimmering purple portal swirled into being. Everyone readied themselves to step through, until Serana spoke. To go into the Soul Cairn, you either have to be one of the undead reborn, like a vampire, or you must trick a portion of your soul into passing through the gate, she warned. Both methods are dangerous. I want Dee and Akaya Mocha to accompany me. The rest of you should stay here. I won't let you go alone, Luster objected at once. Sister Xiaoling said there are dragon-type resentful spirits in there. Serana frowned. But you're asking, are you prepared to lose part of your soul? I'd say I'd lose everything for you if I had to, Luster replied lightly, then opened his sleeve and exposed his forearm. A tattoo ran along his skin, glowing faintly. Don't worry, the restrictions on this portal won't hold us back. For a moment, everyone was speechless. None of them had expected that a world gate could be used this way. Then again, why not? The world gate was the mark of the highest teleportation spells. Someone who bore such a mark could surely ignore the limitations of a lesser portal. It was the kind of hidden advantage only a risk-taker like Luster would discover. So the realm gate can do that, Ma Xiaoling said, impressed. Serana stared at Luster's arm. What do you mean when you said you know a very powerful person? Who is it? You remember the owner of that tavern? Luster asked Serana. That person wasn't from this world. Not a demon, as you might imagine, but a very mysterious being from another realm, a kind of god-level figure. I met Sister Xiaoling and the others there. They're all from different worlds. Different worlds? Serana's eyes widened. You mean besides Nern? After we're done here, I'll take you to the tavern. You'll see how big this universe really is, Luster said with a smile. Serana nodded, but her curiosity was postponed for now. The urgent task was finding her mother in the soul cairn, locating the Elder Scroll-related blood she needed, and uncovering the Divine Bow's secret, anything to stop her father's plot to destroy the world. The six of them stepped through the purple gate. The transit was worse than any of the tavern's Realm Gate rides. Ma Xiaoling felt shoved into a washing machine, dizzy, nauseated, and suffocated by the dense, oppressive darkness that was a sorrowful shade of purple. "This is garbage," Dante muttered, clutching the portal's edge. "Who designed this thing?" Dee sat cross-legged and closed his eyes, forcing himself to adapt as quickly as possible. Jia Mengshang felt cold seep into her bones. That should have come as no surprise. This place thrummed with yin energy. Serana, being vampire, an undead witch of sorts, felt little. And Luster, whose draconic blood made him hardy, didn't seem affected at all. Ma Xiaoling produced a flat red card from her pocket and pressed it into Chai's hand. "Take this. It'll keep you warm." "A charm?" Chia asked, skeptical, then pressed the card to her chest. Immediately, the chill slid away. She tucked it close without another word. "My mentor made these, Taoist talismans fused with modern tech," Ma Xiaoling explained, as if that needed no further justification. "In our world, demons and ghosts are kept secret from the public. I'm an exorcist, so some cover-up is necessary." Chai smiled. "Like putting makeup on a sister." Everyone took a short rest, recovering from their transit. Once they were ready, Serana and her two companions prepared to move through the cairn. The place hung thick with countless grudges, wavering, half-formed, resentful souls. They didn't want to be dragged into needless fighting. Even if they could defeat those undead, the battles would only multiply their problems. "How do we find her?" Ma Xiaoling asked Serana. "This is my first time here, too," Serana admitted. "Don't worry. I have a way," Luster said, producing the notebook that had belonged to Serana's mother. "I can trace a bearer or an object with a tracking spell. If we have a related medium, we can find the owner, or at least their general location." He laid the notebook on the ground and began to weave a quick spell. Milky white light danced around Luster's hands and flowed over the pages. From the book rose a translucent mist that took the shape of an arrow. It hovered, pointed, and then drifted gently in a single direction. "That arrow will point us toward her," Luster said. "Follow it and be ready. The soul cairn guards itself." Chapter 61, Serana's Mother. Using Rust's tracking magic, the six of them set out to find Serana's mother. The strange, spectral landscape of the soul cairn drew everyone's attention. Even Ma Xiaoling, who already knew about the existence of the afterworld, was fascinated. She had never actually entered the soul cairn before and wanted to see it for herself. The journey, however, was rough. Perhaps the way they had entered this realm left ripples behind them because they were repeatedly attacked by spirits. Fortunately, none of them were weak. They fought off the assailants, and along the way, they helped a few trapped souls by fulfilling small requests. Little by little, they learned more about the soul cairn's recent disturbances. Two discoveries worried them more than anything else. First, there was the presence of an ancient dragon soul sealed somewhere in the cairn. Whoever had bound it here remained unknown. That seemed likely to be the reason Ma Xiaoling had to end her last spell early to avoid devastating backlash. Second, Rust's magic confirmed that Serana's mother was still alive and capable of protecting herself. The relief on Serana's face was clear. Following the trail of a lingering soul, they finally arrived at a strange building. Inside, Serana's mother was there, but the entire structure was enclosed in a powerful magical seal that kept anyone from getting close. They tried to break through by force and failed. "This isn't working," Serana muttered, anxiously surveying the barrier. "Didn't you say the boundary gate magic can open any kind of barrier?" Ma Xiaoling asked Rust, looking at him. Rust pressed a hand to the shimmering wall and studied it. "This isn't a simple barrier. It's a strong sealing enchantment." A deep voice answered from inside, and a vampire in a black robe stepped forward from beyond the light. The figure's face was both familiar and strange to Serana. "Mother?" Serana called before she could stop herself. The vampire's expression tightened in confusion. "Serana, why are you here? You shouldn't be here." She hurried to the edge of the seal and peered through at her daughter. Recognition flashed, and then a tumult of emotions crossed her face. Serana fought to control her voice. "Why did you seal me in that place? I want to know." "You never told me how you even came here," her mother said, frowning as she looked past Serana at the others. "Did your father send you?" "No, father doesn't know we came. We came looking for you, and for the Elder Scroll." Serana tried to keep calm. "We need it." "I will not hand over the Elder Scroll to you, Serana," her mother said bluntly. "Your father has gone mad. He's not the man you remember." "I know," Serana replied, "but he already knows about Oriel's bow. We came to stop him." Her mother's face hardened, and for a moment Serana feared the worst, that she would refuse to help. Instead, the woman began to explain why she had sealed her daughter away. She had known of Heger's, Serana's father's, plan to use Serana's blood to defile Oriel's bow and so end the sun's dominion. To protect Serana and the two Elder Scrolls, her mother had taken the scrolls and then sealed Serana away. She had given up her freedom of movement within the cairn to keep the scrolls safe. Serana felt a small, painful relief. "So you've never changed," she said quietly, managing a tired smile. "You always wanted to protect me." "Serana," her mother said, her voice softening, "you should stop looking for the Elder Scrolls. It's much safer here. Heger longs for the world above. He won't come into the soul cairn himself. Even if he does send people, they still wouldn't be able to find the scrolls easily," she added, trying to reassure Serana. "But Serana can't live forever on the run," Rust interjected. "If we don't deal with this, she won't have any future. I can't accept that." Her mother turned on him, contempt flickering in her eyes. "Human, who do you think you are? You don't understand the power of the Vampire King." "Mom, she saved me. She's my partner," Serana said quickly, stepping forward. "She's my lover." The admission made Serana's mother pause. She knew the woman Serana loved. She knew she was gentle, guarded, not given to grand declarations, but she also saw the conviction in Serana's face. Serana begged her once more to tell them where the Elder Scrolls were and to come with them to stop Heger's plan. Her mother considered for a long moment, then gave a condition. "I will tell you where the scroll is, if you prove you're strong enough to take it. This enchantment that protects me and the ancient scrolls is an old sealing spell. To break it, you must destroy 3 soul guards. As long as you can lift the seal, I will give you the Elder Scroll." Rust, Serana, and the rest exchanged looks. Serana's mother continued, "Those soul guards are held in place by a dragon soul. You will have to face that dragon's spirit as well." "That's not a problem," the dragonborn in their group said flatly. "Destroying dragon souls is what I do." Following her instructions, they located the 3 soul guards. They were stationed in the ruins of a nearby tower. From a distance, they could see a pulsating bead at the tower's top, emitting the same kind of energy as the seal. "Stop! This place is forbidden," a harsh, grating voice rattled out, as if nails were being dragged along glass. The sound crawled into their ears and made the hair on their arms rise. "This voice is awful," Dante complained, trying to cover his ears, but the sound continued despite his actions. Rust narrowed his eyes. "It's a soul-type spell. It'll complicate the fight." All eyes turned to Ma Xiaoling. They all knew she had expertise in countering soul magic. She didn't disappoint. From her makeup box, she produced several small paper charms, folding them into 5-pointed stars and explaining that the talismans would grant them some protection. "These will block some of the soul attacks," Ma Xiaoling warned, handing them out. "I don't know how strong the opposing magic might be. We'll have to be fast." "We'll give them a dose of our wrath, then," Rust said, pressing a charm close to his chest as he rallied the group. They moved toward the tower, prepared to fight for the seal, the scrolls, and Serana's future. Chapter 62, Detectives Jointly Handling Cases. The tavern was as lively as ever. While the live broadcast played, patrons clustered around screens and chatted about recent events, Ma Xiaoling's Taoist rituals, Rust's tricks, and so on. Jiangju sat by the window with Xiao He at his feet, a book open in his hands. Unless a particularly interesting new wine arrived or an important guest showed up, he rarely received visitors in person. Customers were gods to some, but no god was bigger than Jiangju's rules. "This broadcast is long," Xiao He remarked, glancing at the screen, just as Ma Xiaoling's dragon burst through to destroy the Soul Guard. People don't just rush through the real world like a game. You can't speed past everything. Jiangju shrugged. Luckily, the road always produces its share of blind bandits and thieves. Otherwise, we'd have to shorten the stream. Now that they've got the ancient scroll, next is finding the divine bow, Xiaohei stretched and said. There's enough good footage here to make several days of videos. Jiangju nodded. Getting the divine bow isn't that hard. The last guy only needed an unbreakable power to finish it. What will be tougher is Serana's father, the vampire king. He's a vampire transformed by the devil himself, Xiaohei added, and then his face went mischievous. He lowered his voice and whispered, speaking of which, that devil really has terrible taste, Zizi. Don't say any more. My stomach can't take what you're implying, Jiangju snapped, but Xiaohei only grinned and earned a swat. The grin widened until he vanished in a puff of shadow. Jiangju shook his head and reached for the book again, but Xiaohei's prank had tossed it from his hands. With a flick, it flew back to the shelf and settled in its place. Moments later, Conan stepped through the boundary gate. He glanced around, saw the person he'd been waiting for hadn't arrived, checked the time, and then walked over to Jiangju. You aren't out solving cases? Jiangju asked, surprised. What brings you to the tavern? Conan greeted him and explained. I ran into a difficult case, and I hoped Brother Lu could help. He asked me to wait here. Jiangju raised an eyebrow. Rare for you to hire outside help. Where's the pride of the famous detective? Pride doesn't matter next to innocent lives, Conan replied quietly. His tone stopped Jiangju from teasing further. Conan wasn't the type to use any means to solve a case, but he also wouldn't hesitate to call in help when people's lives were at stake. Conan laid out the situation. He and Officer Sato of the Metropolitan Police had been investigating a post office robbery. On the way, they met Officers Shiratori and Takagi. Earlier, Takagi had reported receiving a call warning a bomb had been planted nearby. Nothing was found, and they assumed it was a prank. But then, as Shiratori was returning alone, an explosion went off right in front of him. It looks like they're targeting the police, Jiangju said calmly. Conan's expression darkened. After that, the Metropolitan Police received a fax from the gang. From the wording I analyzed, there are actually 2 bombs planted somewhere in Tokyo. They'll go off tomorrow, one at noon and another at 3 in the afternoon. Conan's face was more solemn than Jiangju had ever seen. This person has essentially taken 12 million people in Tokyo hostage, Jiangju murmured, repeating Conan's words under his breath, then added with a snort, Seems the attacker wants to challenge the whole Metropolitan Police. That's exactly what Officer Sato thinks, Conan confirmed. He had already combed through the facts and couldn't pin down the locations by the wording alone. Tokyo was far too big to search comprehensively in that time frame, so he needed another detective of equal caliber. But why Lu Xiaofeng? Why not Poirot or Sherlock? Jiangju asked. Sherlock's modern expertise with explosives would make him a better fit. Conan glanced toward the tavern entrance as a smooth voice replied, Maybe he didn't want me running errands for him. Lu Xiaofeng strolled in, hand on his mustache, smiling as he approached. I don't mind being called in, he said lightly. And if it's about getting around quickly, my Qinggong is nothing to scoff at. Conan visibly relaxed. I wasn't going to make you do errands, Brother Lu. Sherlock would be useful in other ways, but he isn't as, well, practical for moving through the city. And your Qinggong is one of the reasons I asked. Lu Xiaofeng smiled. Jiangju had his own doubts about Conan's choice, but he also knew Sherlock's temperament. It wasn't hard to imagine why Conan might not want Sherlock in this particular role. Name your reward, Conan said, trying to seem casual. I don't have much money, but the doctor has some tools that could help. Lu Xiaofeng shook his head. No, last time you gave me some detective novels. Keep them coming. And I'd like a favor. I've written some thoughts and questions after reading one of those books. Please pass this to the author and bring me any reply. He reached into his tattoo space and produced a thick envelope, handing it to Conan. Put this in your tattoo space, he added to Jiangju. Jiangju flicked the edge of his palm, and a small, private slot opened beneath the table. That space was a luxury, expensive and restricted, and not many tavern owners offered it. Conan lifted the envelope carefully. Author? I'll send it along. Sign the contract, Lu Xiaofeng said with a smile. Jiangju pretended to grumble. You two make me lose money, but he tapped the table and a contract materialized. All three, well accustomed to each other's moods, smiled and signed quickly. Let's not waste time, Lu Xiaofeng said. And don't forget, I trained with S.H.I.E.L.D. My modern knowledge is reliable. Conan nodded. I wouldn't have come otherwise. Jiangju waved a hand. We'll upload your investigation updates to our official site and run it in the tavern. Free publicity for you. Detectives are needed in every world, and we've got viewers. Thanks, boss, Lu Xiaofeng said, bowing slightly. He and Conan left together to begin the hunt. Jiangju sat back down, sipped his coffee, and savored the familiar bitter with a hint of sweetness. He thought about how much attention a case like this would draw if the modern Sherlock and the old-school Sherlock ever worked it together. There was opportunity here. Perhaps it was time to set up VIP services on the site, following Boss Ma's successful example. Not bad, he thought with a small smile. I'm a genius. Chapter 63, General Attack on Forkyhar Castle. It had been almost 3 months since Ma Xiaoling arrived in this world. She had been running non-stop, solving one problem after another. Finally, in an abandoned snow elf temple, she had found a crucial solution, a way to weaken the undead's divine bow and to craft special bows that could exploit that weakness. Serana had learned the technique as well. All that remained was to use the artifact to defeat Serana's father. Then everything would be over. Ma Xiaoling never expected to stay so long. The longer she remained, the more she thought of people from her old life. Her good friend, Wang Zhenzhen, and the man she'd never been able to forget, Kuang Tianyo. She wasn't sure how she felt about Kuang, only that watching him standing beside her best friend made her oddly uncomfortable. He had confessed to Ma Xiaoling right after Wang Zhenzhen had confessed to him. What a scumbag. Sister Xiaoling, what are you thinking about? Qi Mengshang leaned over, curious. Startled, Ma Xiaoling turned and forced a smile without answering. She couldn't tell the others that she was thinking about her best friend's boyfriend, especially not that he'd confessed to her. Chai's expression softened with a teasing understanding. What man? Qi whispered. Enough. Don't be ridiculous, Ma Xiaoling said lightly. Women in our family are not allowed to fall in love. If you shed tears for a man, you lose your magic. Why can't we have love? And love doesn't always mean tears, Qie muttered, still in the painful stage of cutting herself off from longing. You'll understand when you fall for someone, Ma Xiaoling chuckled, but stop talking about it. Rest now. The decisive battle is about to begin. They were approaching Forkyhar Castle. This time it wasn't just the 6 of them. Many of the Dawn Guard had joined the assault. Most of the soldiers were exhausted after the long journey, so to avoid heavy casualties, they intended to make final repairs and launch a general attack in an hour. Serana stood alone on the beach, staring into the distance at a place that was invisible to most eyes, her home, Forkyhar Castle. It was no longer the warm home she remembered. It held only pain, the past she didn't want to speak of, the sealing her mother had performed, the family she had been estranged from. Everything will end soon, Father, Serana whispered to the distant silhouette. Your dream ends with me. Don't worry, it will be fine, Russ said softly as he came up behind her. Serana turned and smiled. For a moment, Rust was stunned. It was perhaps the most beautiful smile she'd ever given. If no one else had been there, maybe the moment would have been different, more intimate. An hour wasn't long, but it was enough. When Ishirin ordered everyone to move out, some complained. They had only just rested. Ishirin had his reasons. The vampires patrolling the coast would notice any delay. Time couldn't be squandered. These talismans will hide your auras, Ishirin said, drawing a bag and distributing a stack of yellow talismans to the Dawn Guard. Don't worry about the monsters in the water. And thanks to Miss Ma Xiaoling for her help, these will reduce casualties. The Dawn Guard saluted with their old ritual. Ma Xiaoling returned the salute, awkwardly copying their pattern. Then everyone boarded a dozen small boats and set off silently. With Ma Xiaoling's talismans shielding them, the flotilla reached the island where Forkyhar Castle stood quickly and unseen. As Ishiran had feared, the island's defenders were waiting. Vampires and gargoyles stood among the darkened turrets and battlements. The battle erupted instantly, but the soldiers were veterans. Though the attack was sudden, they did not panic. The island's heavy clouds blunted sunlight. The vampires were not much weakened and used their immortal abilities and blood magic to wreak havoc. Gargoyles relied on sheer defensive toughness and brutal strength, cutting swathes through the attackers. If these things were easy, the Dawn Guard would be full of survivors, one warrior grunted, clutching a special weapon and slashing at a vampire. Watch out for their blood magic. A gray-haired veteran fired his lover's custom crossbow, a lightning-tipped bolt, to paralyze a vampire, then calmly nodded once the beast collapsed. Another soldier danced around a gargoyle with astonishing speed, landing a few clean blows. He felt elated, sure he had found a way to beat the stone monster. He slipped behind it, ready to strike a fatal blow. The gargoyle suddenly moved faster than stone should have allowed. It grabbed the soldier's limbs and tore him apart as if he were paper. "Max, damn it!" cried a female warrior, watching her lover ripped in two. Flames gathered in her hands. She let loose a fireball that pelted the gargoyle like rain. The stone monster fell, but her lover was gone forever. War was cruel, and this human versus non-human fight was no exception. Grief sharpened into anger, and the soldiers used it to strike back against more vampires. "Push forward. We can't let Hakon escape," Ishiran shouted when the Dawn Guard began taking control of the shoreline. He turned to Rust and the others. "Let them hold the field. You come with me." Rust nodded and followed Ishiran into the castle. The great hall was dim. Near the long, ruined dining table stood nearly 10 pure-blood vampires, their eyes fixed on the intruders. One of them, a young vampire, sneered when he saw Sarana, Akayamoka, and Dee. "Traitors," he spat. "I'll torture you before sacrificing you to the great devil." "A lowly vampire dares to mouth off?" Chia Mengxiang snorted coldly. As a vampire princess herself, she refused to be insulted. "This is pointless. Words won't save them," Dee said, his gaze cold as he looked at the vampires and at the human bones scattered beneath the table. He made no effort to hide his murderous intent. "Kill them." Chapter 64. General Attack. Pure-blood vampires possess a cruel knack that common low-level vampires do not, a strange blood magic. It works instantly and continuously. Anyone struck by it will find their strength, energy, and endurance sapped away. With time, they develop blood fever. If it isn't treated quickly, the victim will be turned into a vampire. That's why hunters facing these fiends must be alert. The moment you suspect infection, you down an anti-plague potion and interrupt the enemy's spell. Even instantaneous magic can be broken if someone disrupts the caster. The hunters who had stormed the castle were all veterans. They knew this. Rust, Dante, Dee, Ishiran, and the others made a team more than capable of dealing with whatever the vampires could throw at them. Akayamoka, the great demon of power among them, fought with blunt, terrifying force. Every strike dug craters in the floor and smashed tables and benches into kindling. "Damn, they're too strong. I'll pull back," one vampire muttered when his comrade fell to Rust and the others. He melted into invisibility and tried to slip away. That proved a fatal mistake. A Taoist priest with yin-yang eyes stood nearby. He invoked a Ma family ritual, a three flavors true fire, blessed by the dragon god and the fire god Zhurong, and the fleeing vampire was seared to ash before he could escape. The air in the great hall chilled and thickened. A creature roughly 2 meters tall drifted into the room, colored skin, fanged mouth, red eyes, bat wings. Hakon, the vampire lord, had arrived. "Hakon," Ishiran cried, and with a single palm he sent a vampire skidding back. Hakon's gaze flicked to his daughter Sarana with contempt. "Oh look, the coward who once begged for mercy to survive," he sneered, then addressed Ishiran directly. "I want that fire. If I kill you, every humiliation will be wiped away." Ishiran's face paled, but he barked back with as much force as he had left. "Humph, deal with the traitor first. I'll pay you back later. I'm not afraid to die." Hakon smiled thinly. "When the Dawn Guard's fortresses become vampire domains, your expression will be a pretty thing to see." "The Dawn Guard doesn't need me, and I'm not a coward," Ishiran roared, hefting his great axe and charging the vampire king. Hellhounds sprang out from behind Hakon, cutting across the battlefield and forcing the hunters to split their attention. Dante sheathed his magic guns and swung his sword. With a practiced motion, he launched a spectral Cerberus. It struck the hellhounds, and then, using the recoil, flew straight at Hakon and slammed into him, giving Ishiran a moment's opening. Ishiran drove his axe down, aiming for the vampire lord's foot, but even a dwarf-forged, mage-enchanted battle axe left only the tiniest scratch on Hakon's flesh. "Damn!" Ishiran cursed as Hakon's winged leap nearly took him from the ground. The vampire lord's bat wings were used not to soar away, but to strike from odd angles. Serana rushed to Rust's side, hurling a bolt of lightning. "My father bears a devil's blessing," she said, breathless. "Unless you destroy that blessing, he cannot be harmed." "The devil's blessing," Rust muttered, understanding. He notched the divine bow and drew a single arrow, the shaft fashioned from Serana's own blood and engraved with a curse that bound and weakened the undead. He let fly. Hakon was watching the battlefield too closely to be taken by surprise. His magic punched the arrow aside with a bright bolt of light. Then he roared, furious. "Serana, how dare you betray me like your worthless mother? I won't let you speak of my mother." Serana snapped. She condensed lightning into a crackling sphere and hurled it at Hakon, freezing him in place for a few breaths. The rest of the hunters poured everything they had into the stunned vampire. Taoist seals, arcane spells, and razor-sharp blades. If only the divine bow could be reloaded quickly, they might have shattered the demonic blessing and turned the tide. Then something strange happened. Instead of weakening him, every attack seemed to make Hakon stronger. He howled and his power flared. "Ha! I didn't expect this. Even your gods' attacks only feed me. They give me strength and pleasure." Hakon laughed like a madman. The sudden reversal stunned everyone. Ishiran, who had been leading the charge, was driven back by a crushing blow. Dante found his torso punctured in several places and bled freely. Injuries spread through the hunters as Hakon's defenses rose. The battle changed from a coordinated assault to desperate survival. Ma Xiaoling, who had watched the fight with mounting urgency, thumbed a small purple card from her sleeve, the highest-grade talisman she possessed. Since losing the Dragon Ball, she didn't know how much of the World Dragon's power she could still muster, but she had to try. "I'll create an opening for you to shoot the magic arrow," she called to Rust. Hakon heard her and snarled. He recognized the threat the divine arrow posed. "I will not let you kill Rust," he vowed, lunging toward him. "Don't you dare touch Rust. She's mine." Serana screamed, and this time she abandoned her human guise. Her form warped into something terrible and inhuman to meet Hakon blow for blow. "Mine?" Hakon mocked. "Serana, you actually speak of lovers? What would your lover think if he knew what you truly are?" Before Hakon could finish, the hall thundered with the roar of a dragon. It was not one of Lester's combat shouts, it was something else. A great, golden Chinese dragon formed out of pure energy in the center of the hall and wrapped its sinuous body around Hakon, coiling him tight. "Now!" Ma Xiaoling shouted. This was the moment to act, to protect Rust's secret and the fragile bond between Rust and Serana. Rust did not hesitate. He drew another divine arrow, set it to the string, and in one flawless motion released. The arrow flew true, pierced Hakon through the head, and vanished into golden light as the dragon opened its mouth and swallowed him whole. The vampire king who had dreamed of domination, the one who had spat contempt and cursed love itself, dissolved in that glow. When the light faded, Hakon was gone, vanished into whatever fate the dragon's swallowing had delivered him to. For a heartbeat, the hall was silent. Then the hunters realized what had happened and breathed out, together and ragged, the hard-won hush of the battle's end. Chapter 65. After the war, Hakon was dead. The vampire lord who had been darkened for who knew how many years, whose crimes had stained decades, had finally been broken. The magic bow and the old curse that sustained him were shattered, and the Ma family's dragon finished him. Even his soul could not escape. Serana stood frozen, caught between relief and grief. No matter what he had become, Hakon was still her father. Rust noticed her turmoil and came to take her hand, offering a quiet steadiness that said she was not alone. Serana's mother, who had given them the Elder Scroll, had not left the soul cairn with them. When Serana learned that her mother was happy, her mother's soul contracted to a point of light and vanished. She had clearly used what remained of her essence to protect the scroll. Later, they would understand that when Serana and the others destroyed the soul cairn's soul guards, they had injured the source of her mother's power as well. For the moment, besides Rust, Serana had no one else to turn to. "It's over," one of the Dawn Guard soldiers said as they stitched Isran's wounds. "Even though there are still vampires, with the king gone they have no leader. The remaining Dawn Guard can clean up the rest." His voice carried a complicated mixture of exhaustion and relief. They had won, but at a heavy cost. Many Dawn Guard had fallen. No one celebrated. They only breathed easier because Hakon was gone. "What are you going to do?" Ma Xiaoling asked Rust. "The job's done. It's time for us to leave." "The Dawn Guard will handle the battlefield," Rust answered after a moment. "We should go back to the College of Winterhold first. Get some rest before we set out again. Don't rush." "Agreed," Dante said as he sheathed his sword and flopped into a half-broken chair. "I'm starving." "You're healed?" Chie Moexiang asked him in surprise. "I never saw that fighting style before, and your blood smelled, well, different. It was a shame we couldn't savor it. But you're fine now, right?" "Ha, little lady, are you teasing me?" Dante raised an eyebrow and grinned. "You don't tease cows and pigs, do you?" Chie snorted. "I don't mess with my food." "You're cruel," Dante said with mock indignation. His exaggerated reaction caused the already wobbly chair to collapse beneath him, and he flopped to the floor. Akaya Mocha burst into laughter. The others watched the pair exchange barbs and laughed softly. The small joke was a necessary release after the battle. When goodbyes were said to the Dawn Guard, they prepared to leave the island. "What will you do with the castle?" Aiken, the interim leader of the Dawn Guard, asked Rust. "You're the owner of the island, Serana. What do you want?" Serana smiled gently and looked at Rust. "This place is my home," she said, voice soft. The others fell silent as the couple shared a tender look. Rust turned to Aiken and made a practical suggestion. "We've decided to offer this as another stronghold for the Dawn Guard. It won't be given away. At most, we'll offer a discount. The upkeep and garrison can be funded by the provincial lords once they know what the Dawn Guard accomplished. I think they'll be willing to invest." "That sounds fair," Aiken said. No one wanted to antagonize the Dragonborn by taking the island outright, and this arrangement preserved both ownership and the Dawn Guard's ability to operate. "Once the funds are raised, send the rent to the college," Aiken added. "All right," Rust said. "We're all exhausted. If you need anything, contact me at the college." With that, Rust, Ma Xiaoling, and the others boarded the wooden boat. He wrapped them in a web of magic and pushed off from the shore. In the world of the Elder Scrolls, the Dragonborn's status as Archmage of the College of Winterhold might not have changed daily comforts, but in this reality, the title carried influence. Winterhold Academy, though damaged by past calamity, remained the center of arcane study in Skyrim. Rust had invested himself in rebuilding it. He was not about to give up that role for a petty title. The island faded into the distance. As the boat neared the mainland, Rust did something that drew everyone's attention. Without explanation, he bolstered his voice with a dragon shout. "Durnavir!" A ripple of cold air swept the shore. The soil beneath them darkened into a strange, purplish earth, like the ground in the soul cairn. Then, with a roar, a massive dragon rose from the ground. It hovered for a moment, then landed with the grace of a creature far larger than anything the island had known. "That's the giant dragon we fought before," Rust said with a small smile. "I thought I destroyed him, but he couldn't be killed. After I bested him, he taught me how to summon his shout so that we could call him when needed. Consider him a temporary ally." "When did this happen?" Mashaling asked, curious. "It happened when you started giving us a hard time with our public displays of affection," Rust said, half joking. "When we were leaving the soul cairn, Durnavir came to our door. We thought we'd have to fight again, but instead he gave us a bargain. He's always wandering, tied to the soul cairn. He can only be free in short bursts. Teaching me his shout was his way of getting help from the living world." The dragon, Durnavir, lowered his massive head and regarded them. His voice was low and echoing. "Dovahkiin," he rumbled, using the Dragonborn's name in the dragon tongue. "What do you want of me?" "It's simple," Rust answered calmly. "Take us to the College of Winterhold. That will be your first task in this world." Durnavir stretched his wings and looked to the sky, then bowed his head as if agreeing. The journey home had just become a lot faster and a lot more spectacular than anyone had expected. Chapter 66, The The white girl is getting married. What is it like to ride a dragon for the first time? Ask Ma Xiaoling, and she'll tell you it's like taking a roller coaster in summer clothes in the middle of winter. The undead dragon had agreed to return briefly from the soul cairn at Rust's request, but it made its displeasure at being treated like a mount loudly known. On the way to Winterhold, it threw a few angry, complicated maneuvers that made everyone's stomachs lurch. Do that again, and I'll turn you into dragon bone soup, Luster snarled as he jumped off the dragon's back, running a hand through hair that had been ripped into some strange new shape. Don't be hasty, Luster. I'm just excited. I haven't left the soul cairn in a long time, the dragon said, a corner of its mouth quirking. Besides, I'm an undead dragon. My bones have been stored for who knows how long. Not very appetizing. Everyone fell a little quiet, but there was no time for complaints. They were at the Winterhold College of Magic. Rust warned the dragon with a wave of his hand. Your roar still carries power. You can fly free, but don't hover over Winterhold. We don't need any misunderstandings. I'll come back to you if I have questions, the dragon replied brightly, and with that, it took off over the academy. Teachers from the college had already run up to the battlements when they saw the dragon. They likely expected a fight, until they saw Rust. The Dragonborn had performed miracles before. This was not the first time the staff had witnessed inexplicable power. Word of your deeds has spread, Chief Archmage. It seems Skyrim's vampires are in trouble, Finis Gast, the summoning instructor, a middle-aged Mediterranean man, said with a smile. It seems the Vampire King has been dealt with. Another miracle from you, Chief Archmage, added Tovdil, tutor of the Change Department. Our college's reputation spreads across the continent again, Farada of the Destruction Department said, not hiding his pride. Rust waved them off. I know, but for now, I need to rest. Tell the kitchen to prepare a good meal tonight. Follow the recipe I left last time. The compliments died on their lips. The promise of a decent dinner was all it took to hush the teachers, who fell into orderly conversation instead of flattery. Watching the six of them walk away, the onlookers felt the age changing around them. Not only had a dragonborn been born again, but powerful new figures like Ma Xiaoling had appeared. Perhaps under her the College of Winterhold will flourish, the librarian Urag Groshub said quietly, smiling. Perhaps we will see the college prosper in our lifetime. Voss chose well. In a quiet tavern, Jiang Ju sat across from a dignified woman in white. They weren't talking about romance so much as cultivation, the way itself. Jiang Ju never dismissed another's path simply because his own was stronger. Every exchange sharpened one's understanding, provided the core of one's Tao remained intact. Thank you, Master. I have gained new insight, the woman in the white robe said, smiling. You're welcome. Discussing the way with someone else can make your own Tao stronger, Jiang Ju replied. If this were my world, I'd be afraid of being absorbed by a stronger Tao when listening to another's teachings, the woman said. There are few people like you who can talk about the way without trying to dominate. That's because of the worlds we exist in, but we'll not argue that now. Jiangju took 2 glasses of wine and handed one over. I heard you're going to marry Xu Xian. You may call me Xiao Qing, she said lightly. The woman in white was Bai Sujin, the white lady. I've been worrying about that. I don't owe him marriage for the life he once saved me, but if my beauty remains while he grows older, I fear loneliness in later years. Love isn't always so simple, Jiangju said. It's true. Bai Sujin's cheeks flushed. I told myself I would give him a life of comfort, but after spending time with him, my heart won't settle. I find I love him. Jiangju said nothing further. In many heavens, the red thread of Yue Lao didn't force love into being. It arranged coincidences and opportunities for 2 people to meet and grow close, shared umbrellas, accidental falls, sudden kisses. It nudged fate. It didn't manufacture feeling. I know different worlds have different rules, Bai Sujin said in a low voice. But I can't stop myself from loving him. If I commit to him, it will be my choice. You could help him. Buy him a secret manual of immortal cultivation from a certain tavern if you wished. But in the end, it's your choice, Jiangju said. He didn't press the matter. Xu Xian might have seemed a coward to him, but to Bai Sujin, he was her husband, and that was none of his business. If in the original tale, Bai Sujin had not committed major offenses, Fahai would never have dared to take her in, Jiangju murmured. She had allies, yet the flood caused countless casualties. She had to bear the consequences of her actions. In the end, some debts must be repaid. He let the thought hang there and did not pry. Some paths people must walk themselves. Chapter 67 Return. Jiangju watched Bai Suzhen's retreating back and felt the old knot of worry tighten in his chest. It wasn't the immediate complications he feared so much as the long, tangled grudge between Bai Suzhen and Fa Hai. Bai Suzhen's path to cultivation hadn't been easy. She'd swallowed the golden elixir once meant for Monk Hai in a previous life, and that one act had severed Fa Hai's way and forged implacable hatred between them. Whether or not Bai Suzhen ultimately let Su Xian accompany her to ascend to immortality, that hatred would keep pulling disaster back toward her. Jiangju wasn't given to melodrama. People who came to the tavern were, after all, customers first. He'd help if he could, but he wasn't going to throw himself headlong into danger for something that might never happen. There was a time to act, and a time to wait until the danger actually arrived. The tinkling of the door's wind chime cut through his thoughts. Xiaohei padded in, nudged Jiangju's shoulder and yawned, then hopped up to perch there like a cat on its favorite ledge. "You've been out causing trouble lately," Jiangju said with a smirk. "You told me to watch Qin Shuang and Ni Feng." "I just wanted to go shopping for a bit," Xiaohei shrugged. He hadn't become an immortal yet, but his illusion skills were good enough to let him slip away now and then. "What's that braised egg been up to?" Jiangju asked. "We've been digging into Hydra," Xiaohai replied. "We've found and beaten up a lot of people. He's strong, most of the mid-level agents, and even some of the higher-ups are under control now. There's still that stubborn one who won't move. If he stays like this, he's no Nick Fury." "That should cut down the chance of another nuclear mess at every turn," Jiangju said, rolling his eyes. "The idiot in New York, what a mess." "Actually, that bomb indirectly saved the world," Xiaohei said with a rueful smile. "If not for Iron Man, nobody would have stopped that nuke." "Still," Jiangju mused, "if anything had to happen, Gu Yi would have acted. She was in New York at the time." Xiaohei stretched, the yawning turning into a big, deliberate stretch. "I'm exhausted. I'm going up for a nap." He curled into a small ball and promptly fell asleep right on Jiangju's shoulder. Jiangju watched him with an affectionate, exasperated expression. Xiaohei always did what he liked, and there was no point fussing. They had the time. Picking a book from the shelves, Jiangju let his gaze wander around the tavern. Business had been slow today. Zeus had come early that morning, as usual, but left in a hurry after his wife reported the divine fire had been stolen. Gandalf and Dumbledore were absent too. Magneto was probably at some party. Stephen Zhou hadn't been around much lately. Word was he was preparing to leave their world. Ah Xing was busy with the revolution. Lu Xiaofeng had been spirited away by Conan and hadn't returned. Orochimaru and Tsunade had just gotten married, happily, but they hadn't dropped by in ages. Thinking about the scattering of friends and allies, Jiangju felt a familiar small loneliness tug at him. "Oh, poor me," he muttered for the sake of the empty room, and looked at the current customers with a wry grin. They were an odd bunch. One sat cloaked in black, wearing a strange hat and a respirator he never seemed to remove, even when drinking. Another glowed with bluish light and wore a black suit with an atomic symbol on his forehead, definitely not from this world. There was a black and white creature at a corner table. Its head, abdomen, and back were glossy black, a carapace like that of a longhorn beetle adorned with white spots. It made an odd clicking noise that set everyone slightly on edge. And then, occupying the far end of the room, was a lanky space dinosaur, Jayton, who, despite his bulk and odd looks, seemed to be behaving himself. The wooden door opened again, and Ma Xiaoling wandered in with 4 companions. Rust and Serana were noticeably absent. The newcomers paused, taking in the eerily quiet tavern and the parade of strange patrons. They exchanged a look as if to say, maybe that's why business is thin today. "You're back," Jiangju called, brightening immediately. The live stream had doubled his usual takings, and these regulars were worth their weight in gold. "How was the commission?" "It's done," one of them answered. "Boss, what do you recommend?" I haven't had any of your tavern wine in ages. I'm starving. Yes, and give me pizza and a huge strawberry sundae, Chia Mengsheng added, practically salivating. Dante shouldered his big sword casually and slung it on the rack behind him. Make mine a big one too, he said, not bothering with ceremony. Jiangju clapped his hands. Within a breath, pizza and sundae appeared on the table in front of Chia Mengsheng and Dante. And you two? He asked, turning to Di and Ma Xiaoling. They took their seats, still studying the eclectic crowd, as Jiangju went about refilling glasses and pouring spirits. For all the monsters and heroes who drifted in and out of his little tavern, it was the same familiar rhythm. Conversation, a little gossip, the clink of plates and cups, and the soft murmur of people keeping trouble at bay. At least for tonight. Chapter 68, Barry Comes for Help. The day was bright and clear. Sunlight poured through the tavern windows and landed warm and lazy on everyone's faces. It was the kind of weather that begged for a nap, but Jiangju couldn't afford one. He had a tavern to run. The place was packed. Regulars filled their usual spots, and a few surprising guests had come by. Orochimaru and Tsunade, accompanied by Jiraiya. As usual, Jiraiya lingered a little too long near Tsunade, and his crush showed plainly, though she and Orochimaru seemed blissfully oblivious. Since Orochimaru and Tsunade were apparently married now, Jiraiya had probably, finally, given up. A delegation from the Eastern Fairyland had also arrived. In a corner sat a handsome man in black, a paper fan in his hand, and a faint silver mark on his forehead. Nearby, a graceful, smiling man in a red traditional tunic and a black gauze cap chatted with an old man who had white hair and a childlike face, dressed in white. On the other side of the room, a pair of monks relaxed. A plump, cheerful middle-aged monk in patched white robes and a scruffier monk in blue-gray robes, one hand wrapped around a broken fan. At that moment, the two were holding glasses of fine wine and gnawing on a sauced pork knuckle with obvious pleasure. "Ha! Boss! Coming here is always a different experience," Stephen Zhou said as he swaggered up to Jiangju. His hair had a touch of gray today, and he wore a tang suit, half amused, half nostalgic. "This is exactly why I opened a tavern," Jiangju replied with a smile. "It's no fun cultivating alone in some corner. A busy tavern lets you observe life, see every day for what it is. It keeps you sane." Stephen, no, the god of cookery now, laughed. "Too bad I can't stay around forever. The Jade Emperor has summoned me back. I can't refuse." "You can always pass through the world gate from the fairy realm," Jiangju said lightly. "They can't lock you out." The god of cookery's smile wavered. "Maybe, but after I return, my soul comes back with all my memories. I won't be as free as before. Besides, I've got children now. I can't just be a wandering immortal anymore." "You're welcome here anytime," Jiangju said warmly. "I'll come when I can." The god of cookery promised. He glanced around the tavern. "Before I go, let me cook for you. I brought everything I need." "You're all in luck," Jiangju announced, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. "The god of cookery's cooking tonight. Drinks are on the house. Help yourselves." The room erupted in cheers. Newcomers looked puzzled until their neighbors leaned over to explain. "The god of cookery? He's one of the immortals from another world." The man in the black gauze cap said with a grin. "He's said to attain enlightenment through food. I was lucky enough to taste his cooking once," the white-haired, childlike old man, Bai Pao, said, smiling. "That food, it contains the very principles of heaven and earth. There is nothing like this in our world. This tavern truly opens your eyes." "I thought I knew most ailments in the world," the man in red, Wu Zi, mused. "But coming here, I realize how much I don't know." "The tavern's owner is mysterious," Bai Pao said softly. In his own world, he had thought himself invincible, until he found a strange door in the mountains behind his house, a door to a new world that revealed just how many powerful people existed beyond his imagination. Laughter and conversation swelled. Even those who kept to themselves felt the warmth of the room. It was a lively, harmonious scene. "Free drinks? You're really willing to do it?" Xiao Hei sidled up to Jiangju, eyebrows raised. "Why would I be stingy now?" Jiangju scoffed. "This is food cooked by the god of cookery. Once people taste it, they'll come back for more. My profits will only grow, and I might as well charge fairy world prices. If heaven complains, I'll worry about that later." "You've got an ego the size of the moon," Xiao Hei muttered, but he was smiling. Oh, your friend is here. Looks like trouble. Jiangju didn't even need to turn. With his spiritual awareness, he could sense everyone who entered. He'd expected a flash before. The last one had been Wally West, but this time it was Barry Allen. Barry, here for a drink? Jiangju called. Barry pulled off his hood and offered a tired, wry smile. Hi, Jiangju. I actually came on business. I need your help. Couldn't you just post it on the notice board? Jiangju asked. What's going on? Aliens have shown up in my world, Barry explained, voice tense. They're powerful. I know a few of my friends who are aliens too, but I don't think just the usual people are enough. I need to get a better look at the situation, evaluate it. I think I understand, Jiangju said after a beat. You know I can assemble a good team for dealing with aliens. Go meet your father first, and I'll notify the others. Wait until the contracts are signed. Thanks, Barry said, relief flickering through his tired face. Then he glanced around, puzzled by the unusually festive atmosphere. Why's everyone so cheery today? The god of cookery is about to leave, Jiangju explained. He'll be returning to another plane, so he's treating everyone to a final meal before he goes. Bring your father. There's no point rushing off before you've eaten. Besides, no matter how urgent, they can't leave until the contracts are done. Chapter 69, Barry and Father. After Barry left the tavern, he blurred into a streak of gold and vanished at the door. He had been training with the Speed Force for years now and had some control over it. He no longer had to worry about his clothes catching fire when he ran. A moment later, he reappeared at his father's apartment and pressed the doorbell. The door opened about a minute later. Henry Allen stood there, startled and then beaming. Barry, come in, quick! I didn't expect you. Barry stepped inside and hugged him. How are you doing, Dad? He asked, genuinely concerned. He had arranged for his father to live in another world, but there was a portal connecting it to this one. Henry could come here whenever he wanted. For Henry, the move had been a fresh start. With Jiangju's help, he had opened a small clinic, occasionally answering calls as a sort of local superhero, and he seemed to be comfortable. I'm doing fine, Henry said with a smile. Small clinics don't have that many patients. It's mostly common illnesses. The stuff I learned can still be used, even if the world is different. Barry hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at him for a long time. Do you ever want to go back? Henry was quiet for a moment. Barry, you have to understand. I like it here. It's a good life. You're always welcome. You can come visit anytime. I was the one who got you into this, Dad, Barry said, his voice soft. If it weren't for the whole Flash thing, if I hadn't been the Flash, my mother might still be alive. I keep thinking it's my fault. Henry put a hand on his son's shoulder. I'm not blaming you, Barry. You're my son, the child of your mother and me. We're proud of you for what you've done, for how many people you've saved. Don't beat yourself up. Barry smiled at his father, but there was a weight he kept to himself. He never told Henry the whole story. How the Reverse Flash and other speed-related enemies had torn their family apart, how he had tried to undo the tragedy. When he'd changed the timeline, things had spiraled out of control. New enemies appeared, old lives were rearranged. He'd had to travel back again to stop his past self, and every trip shifted reality a little more. Cisco's brother had been lost. Diego's daughter had somehow become a son. The worst blow had been losing Patty. Her existence had been erased. He had wanted to go back and fix that too, but Jay Garrick from Earth 3 had stopped him. Jay had told him that every change costs something, that the more he altered history, the more he would lose. Barry hadn't told Henry any of that. He couldn't bear to make his father worry. The burden was his alone now. Barry, you okay? You zoned out, Henry said, his voice bringing Barry back to the present. Oh, sorry, Dad, Barry replied, feeling sheepish. Henry brightened. So what should we have for lunch? I made some pasta. It might not be much, but I also bought an energy tonic from a Taoist priest in Shabak City. It's supposed to be really good. Barry laughed. Tonic, huh? Sounds exotic. Henry continued, almost as an afterthought. I can get into the tavern if I need to, but I can't use the wooden door to get back into my world. I rarely go. The drinks there are too expensive. I buy a few things now and then, but mostly I just work at the clinic. He glanced at the watch on his wrist, a gadget he kept for emergencies. I do have this card reader, but I only use it if there's a real emergency. I don't want to live off your money, Barry. I have my hands and my training. The clinic brings in enough. Sounds like you've got it under control, Barry said. There's something else, Barry added. Mr. Steve Zhao invited me to the tavern. He's leaving this world for somewhere like heaven, he said. Free drinks and lunch today. Steve Zhao? Henry's eyes lit up. I've heard of him. In that case, I'll save the pasta for next time. Give me a minute. I'll change. Henry turned toward the bedroom. He was about to step away when a rapid knock sounded at the door. Barry opened it and found a kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old, standing there, cute but panicked. Dr. Allen, please come quick. My aunt collapsed, the child blurted out. Where is she? Did you call an ambulance? Barry asked instinctively, but the child simply called for Dr. Allen again, louder this time. Henry was already moving. Seeing the boy made him think of the Parkers next door. Take him with you, Barry, Henry said, grabbing a small first aid kit off the shoe cabinet. Led the way. They hurried across the street to a rundown apartment building. The wooden door to the unit was open. Inside, they found a well-kept woman lying on the floor. She was breathing, but unconscious. She's breathing, Henry said, kneeling beside her. Barry, call an ambulance. I'll see if I can wake her up.